What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today I want to talk through my April wrap up. Hello, so welcome to this video. I am so super excited to talk about the books that I read in April. I want to go through this and talk through each book and explain where it fit with the Magical Readathon and if it fulfilled any other prompts in my life reading challenges. And there's a lot of different components to this because I ended up reading 17 books in April and I'm thrilled! So we'll talk about the stats and then go into each book and talk about where they fit and hopefully mark off some stuff from our bookish peeps and go board. So let's dive into the stats. So like I said, in April I read 17 books, which equated to 5,589 pages. What the fuck? So that works out to be 186 pages per day and 329 pages per book. So reading where I want to be sitting. I didn't have a lot of chunkies. I had one over 500 pages, but the rest just were in that 300, 400 mark, and so I read a lot. In terms of breakdown, I read 3 that were in the hundreds range, 4 that were in the 200s, 6 that were in the 300s, 3 that were in the 400s, and 1 in the 500 page range. My average rating was 4-star. I had 1 classic, 2 contemporary, 1 dystopian, 5 fantasy, 1 historical, 2 paranormal, 1 romance, erotica, paranormal, and 4 sci-fi. I read 3 physical books. I listened to 2 audiobooks. I read 1 ebook and audiobook combination, and I read and listened to 11 books concurrently. I read 4 middle grade, 8 YA, and 5 adult. I had 3 3-stars, 2 3.5s, 7 4-stars, 2 4.5s, and 3 5-stars. I read 5 standalones, and I started 4 series. I have decided to DNF 1. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's all good. I had 7 books that were continuations in series, and that was 5 different series. I didn't catch up on any, but I did complete 1. My biggest book was Crown Baker by Sebastian de Castell, which was 504 pages. And my smallest was The Deception by K.A. Applegate, which was 118 pages. My listening hours was a 43.69, which was still less than January, where I read 14 books, so very proud of that. In terms of publication year, I had 1 that was published in 800s, 1 in 84, 3 between 2000 and 2005, 3 between 2006 and 2010, 6 between 2016 and 2020, 2 2021s, and 1 2022. So those are all my stats, and I'm just I'm so happy. I'm really proud of what I accomplished, and I'm just feeling really good about my reading and sort of hoping I can continue this momentum into May, but we'll see. I might have burnt myself out. Who knows? So on to the books. The first book that I read was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and this was the class of law for Magical Readathon. I ended up giving this a 3.5 because I was very much surprised by it. I'm discovering that I'm not like a historical reader. So if it's set in history and real world, I don't always vibe with it, and I wasn't sure if this was going to be my vibe or not, and it pleasantly surprised me. I do know that Delia Owens has some problematic things in their background, so make sure that you check that out. This story was very, I want to say heartbreaking, but it wasn't in the fact that Kaya is really such a strong, independent person. Whilst you don't want anyone going through this situation, it's really just a beautiful exploration of stereotypes, and overall, I enjoyed it. The reason that it's a 3.5 is because whilst I enjoyed it, I didn't really care. Very funny brain, thank you for doing your thing and being coherent. I liked seeing where it was going, but I could put it down at any time and not feel any inclination to pick it back up. Next up, I read The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, and this was for animal studies because I flipped a coin and got the fiction side. So I ended up picking this up and I gave it a 4 stars. It was really captivating, and the audiobook is very unnerving. I wasn't expecting it to be as dark. It's not that dark, but it was more darker than I was anticipating, because in this world, men can hear the thoughts of everyone, and so when people are feeling intense emotions and you're walking through a crowded place, it's intense. I'm curious to see where the next ones go. I don't know, where we're sort of heading, but I'm very curious to find out. Next up, I read The Revelation by Kay Applegate, which is book 45 in the Animal series, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoy Marco's perspective. I'm finding that his character just goes into a lot more depth, and we got introduced to some other aspects that have been lacking in the Animal series, and so I'm very curious. I really enjoyed this and felt very compelled to continue on and see where we're traveling. It felt like the final arc was starting to occur, and whilst it didn't feel 100% like, oh my god, I'm back in love with this, it definitely had a lot more of that I'm here, I'm ready, I am pumped, I want to know what happens. And so as a result, it was a very enjoyable read. Next up, I read Heart of Gold by Michael Pryor, and this was for the Alchemy Magical Readathon prompt. This is the second in the Laws of Magic series, and I gave it a 4.5. I didn't love it as much of Blaze of Glory, but I still had so much fun with it. The magic system in this is very unique, and I just really appreciate what our characters are going through and being able to move into different settings, learn different types of things, and address the magic in a unique and authentic way. So with that, the one thing that I didn't like is that there's always like oh, he's going to be like magically cured. Oh wait, he's not. And it's predictable. Interesting in the way that it's done, but I expected him to not be cured by the end of this book. So I'm intrigued to see how many times we go down this avenue of him finding something and then losing it throughout the book, because there are another 4 books in the series. But overall, I just have so much fun with it. It feels very nostalgic, even though I only read the first one when I was a teenager. I didn't continue on with the series, but very happy to have finally continued on with it. Next up, I read Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios, and this was for the Elemental Studies prompt. So this book I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed the fact that it dealt with a really hard topic matter of a toxic relationship. I think the way that the story was told, of having looked back in, we know that Grace is narrating from the present and talking through what had happened in their year of their relationship. I think that it dealt really well with having those conversations and presenting it in a way that is relatable to teenagers, in the fact that you think that you know the best, and that's okay. Your friends can see that you're getting more and more miserable, and they're trying to reach out and trying to tell you that, hey, your boyfriend's a bit of a dick. The way that you're currently feeling and your own emotive stance is so powerful. And I felt like it really made it clear that Grace was a victim, and it wasn't her fault that she couldn't get out of this relationship. And I just appreciate that it really brought to light those manipulation strategies in relationships, and the fact that there are key things that can be prevalent in abusive relationships, and this mentions them. So it makes the reader think on, oh, that's not actually a positive trait. I know that our protagonist is thinking this is great, but it's not, and she comes to realize these different things, and that self-discovery allows the readers to discover along with her. So if a teenager was stuck in a relationship and read this, they'd be potentially able to see some of those flags and either better equip themselves or choose to ignore it because you're in love, and that is just the way that these things go. Also, there isn't always the resources or the support networks to be able to leave. So I really appreciated that this book exists and we can give it to teenagers. The only reason I gave it 4 stars, if I read this as a teen, I would have given it 5. It's just, as I read so much now, I'm finding that I'm really noticing YA writing, and occasionally it pulls me out of the story going, oh, that was a choice of words. But aside from that, I had a lot of just emotions while reading this, and very much appreciated. Next up, I read Girl, Serpent, Thorn, and this was for the Demonology prompt, and also for my Bookish Peeps Control My Life. So I'll stick to that and then talk about this. So Girl, Serpent, Thorn was a 4-star read for me. I had a lot of fun with this. I found that it was just a quick palette cleanser, and whilst I did read a lot of YA this month, I felt that the writing in this was fun. I didn't feel like it took itself too seriously, but still had serious conversations in it, And overall, it was just a really unique take on gaining your own power and control and thinking of your curse in a different light. I really liked the conclusion and the relationship between two characters, and I really enjoyed seeing the play between being a princess or a monster and coming into yourself and realizing in yourself who you are and how you want to shape your life. Next up, I read The Deception by K.A. Applegate. So with this book, I did give it a 4 stars. I really enjoyed seeing Axe take a different stance than usual and taking the Andalite stance, not the human. I thought it was really interesting that the writers chose to go down this path so close to the ending, but I feel like it really helped to solidify the fact that Axe is different from the Animorphs. He is not in the same boat as them. Whilst he does really aspire and cherish them, he has his duty above all else, and this was just a very interesting exploration of that and how far Axe is willing to go for the good of the world. I think it's very interesting comparing him to the Animorphs who have particular moral stances on things, and I just enjoyed seeing this perspective done differently, and the ending was also quite surprising. So I had a fun time getting through this. And then the next book that I read was The Resistance by K.A. Applegate, and this one I gave 3 stars because it was just fucking weird. Beavers, dams, not actually succeeding, making things so much worse, and it just overall was very irrelevant. It didn't really do anything. And so it was okay to read, but for the overall story, I don't feel like it did anything to actually progress it. And The Resistance was my psionics and divination prompt of Clouds on the Cover. So I had to read the other 2 Animorphs to get to there. Then I read All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue for spells and incantations, and I gave this a 4.5. I'm so curious to continue on with the series. I do own the second one and I'm wanting to pick it up sooner rather than later. We're following Maeve, who has a tarot deck and starts giving tarot readings, and then things start happening. I really enjoyed the representation in this. I'm not sure how Own Voices reviews feel, but I just enjoyed the dynamics that I could relate to and seeing representation in an Irish setting. And it got creepy. There were aspects to it that I was not prepared for, and I just appreciated the fact that there was all different forms of relationship at the forefront, and it just really approached a lot of topics well. I think that it was crucial, and I would have loved to have read when I was slightly younger, in terms of social acceptance and wanting to climb the social ladder and turning your back on friends who aren't as cool as you, and sort of just confirming to myself, like, you can be that weird fucking freak, it's fine, you don't need to be popular. And I feel like a lot of teenagers would get a lot out of this nowadays. Next up, for Restoration, I read Crownbreaker by Sebastian de Castell, which was my blind pick, and I gave this 5 stars. I love this series. I was very surprised with how this went, and I wasn't expecting the ending at all, but I'm so glad that it went the way that it did. And this is the 6th book in these and final book in the Spellslinger series, and we're following Kellen as they're discovering where they sort of fit in the world. I cried. I didn't like fully break down in tears, but I definitely had the emotions going, and I really appreciated that this ended how it did, and I'm so excited to read more Sebastian de Castell in the future because I just adore their writing style of the characters and seeing everything tie up. Next up, I read The Scapegraces for Astronomy, and this is by Hannah Abigail Clark, and this is also for my bookish peeps. So Cara did say Scratch Daughters in her video, but I have confirmed with her that she did just mean the first one. I'll hopefully get to the second, but for this I'm just counting it as The Scapegraces, and it's just down the bottom here. And there we go. Oh, it's filling out. So for The Scapegraces, I gave it 4 stars. It was fun. I didn't really know if we were gonna go dark, if we were gonna go twisty, where we were gonna end up, but I really had so much fun with this. The characters are unique in their own right, and I felt that the exploration of magic was done just so uniquely. It drew on a lot of different topics, and it had a lot of different aspects to it that made it such a quick and fascinating read. It did read a little bit more on the YA end, but that is fine. I think teenagers that are into mystical and magical will really get a kick out of this, and I really liked the conversations around sexuality and being yourself and embracing what is your power. Then I read Arizona by Ada Maguire for Inscription, and I gave this a 3.5. This series. So I had never read this before. I really enjoyed Jonas and just fell in love with it, had a lot of nostalgic vibes to it. This one, I did not. I still enjoyed looking into the mystery, learning more about the beautiful dead and how they work and adding different people. It definitely wasn't afraid to go there, and I felt like there was a lot to talk about. The thing is, there is non-verbal autism rep in this, and I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not autistic, I'm not in correlation with anyone that has a non-verbal autism in their life, but there were moments that I was like, oh, okay, I'm not sure how I feel about this. So that's why I gave it a 3.5, because overall the story was fun. It was a light-hearted read, but then there was this aspect to it that I was constantly going, okay, yeah, cool. Like, I can see that this is trying to talk about this conversation, but I don't know how well it's conversing. With this, the kid is sent to schools. They try every therapy, and it's made out like this kid's neglected by their parents. They just didn't want a kid that was abnormal, and the sister defended this kid to the nth degree, and so she passed away and would like to sort of just confirm that their brother is going to be okay. So that's like one of the main aspects of this, aside from who murdered her, and it got dark. Like, I was not expecting where it went. There was cheating, there was very like aggressive, borderline on domestic abuse. It was a lot, and I didn't know how I felt about it, but I read it and it kept me captivated. Next up, I read Anxious People by Frederick Bachman for Conjuration, and I gave this 5 stars. I think I love Bachman's writing. I know that I really struggled to get into Beartown because it is so hockey based and sports based, and I don't do sports, but this and Britt Marie was here. They just hit all the right notes. There are so many different aspects to this, and it writes in a way that really hits home. It does deal a lot with anxiety, depression, suicide, fucking up your life, feeling like you've made the wrong choice, not knowing where you are, relationship and marital issues, different dynamics, and having same-sex relationships. Overall, it hit. I was crying by the end of it, and I was working on a jigsaw, and Ash has just looked up and my tears are just streaming down my face. I don't know if everyone will cry at it, but I think that kudos to the translator, Neil Smith, because I believe that they managed to capture Bachman's emotions and describe it in a way that is just beautiful. I read sections out to Ash and he's like, why are you gonna hurt me like this? So yeah, 5 stars. I utterly adored this. Obviously, because I forgot, it is also on my Bookish Peeps, thanks to Charlotte. So, whoop. So that was Anxious People. Next up, I read So Long and Thanks for All the Fish by Douglas Adams, and I gave this 4 stars. I'm actually super happy because I'm starting to appreciate the humor in this a lot more. This wasn't actually for Magical Readathon. I just threw it on because of the Don't Forget Your Town one, as well as the 2 other Animorphs, so that's where the 17 comes into, because there was 14 prompts. And yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm very happy that I've continued on with the series and we'll be finishing it off soonish. I think I didn't know how I was supposed to feel about this humor, and I would always like read into it too much, and just letting it go and going with the flow, seeing how I just vibed with it. It was a much more enjoyable experience, and I definitely had a lot more fun reading this. Next up, I read the Iliad, only half of this, by Homer for Artificery, and this is also on my Bookish Peeps bingo. So that's oops. Oh my god, it's filling out so much. This is great. So for the Iliad, I actually ended up lowering my rating from the first time that I read it, from a 4 stars to a 3 stars. This is just not my thing. I will have a vlog going out. This is part of my project with Mel, where I don't really talk through my thoughts because I just sort of rolled with it. I wanted to know what we were comparing to, but at the same time I didn't want to critique it in a way when the things that we're critiquing it on are the reasons why we're reading them retellings. And there was female presented, there was discussions with females. It wouldn't be like a high Bechdel test, but it had elements to it. The women were not completely non-existent in the story. But with that, I just don't give a shit about war stories, and the men were just complaining and being whining children over what? And then the gods fucking caused havoc. The thing that I managed to get me through this was finding the audiobook that was narrated by Dan Stevens, because that man will butter my ovaries with his voice, and I really enjoyed it. But at the same time, him reading it was not enough for me to feel an overwhelming desire to devour this, and I found that I really struggled because I do immersion reading so much that having the text not be concurrent and the same, because you have different interpretations, I was tempted to go buy the ebook of the book that I was reading just so I would have the exact same thing. And so that tripped me up, and that was a lot more of my stumbling block, whereas the last time I just decided to listen to it. But then I didn't retain anything because I was just listening to it. So there was a catch-22. Overall, I'm glad that I did this to be able to have more of a remembrance of the backstory to the stories that I am reading the retellings of, but at the same time, can grown-ass men stop making wars over women and being dumb fucks about it? Next up, I read Rainbow Grey, Eye of the Storm by Laura Ellen Anderson, and this was for Art of Illusion, where I had to match my clothes to the cover. That's funny that that purple matches almost identically. I was wearing my rainbow cardigan when I was reading this and picking this, so that's how that came on to my tibia. With that, I gave this 5 stars. I am adoring this series. I think it's really beautiful at looking at differences and trying to be yourself and trying to be helpful and just wanting to do the right thing by others, but having so many people talk back against yourself and doubt your capabilities and doubt that you aren't going to be an evil person and trying to show them wrong, but having to go through the process of learning to believe in yourself first. And I feel like this book does it excellently. I love seeing kids pick up the series, and I'm very excited that the 3rd one is coming out. I am sort of sad because that's the reason I had no catch-ups, because I thought this was a catch-up, but the next book is coming out on the 1st of May. It was great seeing Gusty Gab again, and this series just is a bundle of joy. And then the last book that I read was a book that I read and that was All He Wants for Christmas is a Fingling by J.P. Sale. I was not remotely prepared for this. I knew that it was going to be weird. You have a werewolf dating a potato, but oh my god. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Need a lift?
Yes, please. It's a bit wet down here.
Okay, I will be less than 5 minutes. Oh god, don't fall. Sorry about that. Feel like I might have accidentally kicked or moved the camera. I had to go pick up Ash. This ironically fitted perfectly for the shape-shifting prompt for Magical Readathon and is on my bookish peeps, so let's mark that off. So for that, it's Amy's prompt of a book reminding you of potatoes. So obviously, considering the protagonist is a potato, that counts. There we go. This book was an experience, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I just was not prepared for what it ended up being. I knew that it was going to be weird. I knew that it was going to be wacky. Like, that's the whole series title. I just wasn't mentally prepared for everything. It is Grumpy Sunshine, Weird Shifters, Fated Mates, Opposites Attract, Male Shifter, and Male Pregnancy. And I was reading this going, what the fuck did I just read? And then continued to read it and continued to think, what the fuck did I just read? So it was an experience, and I think that's why I am happy that I read it, but I genuinely have no idea any other feeling. But okay, that was an experience. So I gave it 3 stars. I don't think that this is going to be my kind of Katie Robert. I don't know if shifters are just not for me, or if it was just the way that it was written was very, I don't even know the way to describe it. Like, I read it to Ash and he was like, oh. I'm still happy that I read this for the challenge of a book that reminds you of potatoes, and that Charlotte kindly gifted it to me, but an experience was had. So with that, that is the 17 things that I read. But I do have one more thing that I can check off from here. So it was a very Mel heavy completing month because I managed to complete both her action and her book. And her action was to do a third of a video singing. And so I put out my March book haul, which only had 2 books. And so I did that. Please no one ever go watch it again. I'm mortified. So with that, that's that prompt here. And there we go. Oh, it's so filled out. So I need to read a black horror and I will have completed that row, and I've got make a Korean inspired meal and 6 of crows to get that. And I'm feeling really good about it. I have really enjoyed everything that I've picked up, as interesting as they might have been. So this was the stack plus the 3 Animorphs of books that I read in the month of April. And fuck, this is heavy. Let me know in the comments below what was your favorite read of April. Mine was definitely Anxious People. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!